before you interrupted me, yeah, I think that there's a lot of nonsense said about how the EU stops us doing a lot of things. Very often, the Tory government will use the EU as an excuse not to take action on steel when it could have done. They had the same issue around the coal industry in my constituency when the last pit closed, when the EU had said actually they would be able to help, and it was the Tory government who said no, we can't. So I think too often this is used as an excuse not to take action when we can do. But when it comes back to this basic point about what in the end are the facts, people will throw different numbers at you, but the bottom line in the end is that the cost of trade will be higher. If we are outside the single market, the cost of trade will be higher. They will give us a worse deal than the one we've got now. Why on earth would they let us still be in the club and give us a worse deal than the one we've got right now? And that means we would lose jobs and we would lose investment.
We deal with this subject every week. Everywhere we go, we deal with this subject. I don't want to stay on it. We've spent half the programme on it. You can have one sentence, Tim, and then I'm going to move on.
Steel.
Not too long a sentence either.
What we've seen in the steel industry is the consequences of a Chinese government's actions and an Indian businesses' decisions, proving that we are interconnected as a globe and we are far better off, together with our neighbours, standing up to those economic threats than on our own.
We could put I'm going to move on. I'm going to move on, so we've taken a half an hour, and I don't think it's fair if every programme is entirely about the EU, because we have a long way still to go, and a lot of question times and debates, and goodness knows what, before we reach that date in June when Paul Mason has to decide how to cast his vote. We're going to be...
And millions of other people.
And millions of other people. We're going to be in Ipswich next week, I should just say, and we're in Cardiff the week after that. And if you look at the screen there, you'll see how to apply. You can make a note of the website and the telephone number. I'll give it again at the end. But let's move on for a question. Kevin Wilkes, please. Kevin Wilkes.
After the junior doctors debacle, isn't it time for the NHS to be ran independently rather than continually being a political football?
OK, so... Tim Farron.
I'll tell you what it is. It's certainly time for it to stop being used as a political football, to answer your question specifically. If Beveridge, the Liberal, who wrote the blueprint for the National Health Service in the 1940s, in his day we'd been living to the ages that we are now, there is no question whatsoever that he would have included social care in with the National Health Service. And the fact that it is disjointed and disconnected from the National Health Service has to be addressed now, as does the relegation of mental health services behind physical health services. We have a National Health Service of which we should be massively proud, but let's not kid ourselves that we are spending enough on it. We are not. We spend less per capita, or less percentage of GDP on our health service than most other European countries. It is time for a new Beveridge deal for all parties to put aside the politicking over the National Health Service and recognise we need that new deal to protect it for the future. It's no good putting the emphasis on junior doctors, as has happened over the last few months, to try and stretch out the resource so the government can meet a commitment it never could really meet. It's time for new resource. It's time for a new deal for the National Health Service, including mental health and social care.
But Tim, you're talking about finding more money for the NHS.
In the end, that is going to be absolutely necessary.
But the question is about whether it can be taken out of politics.
Which is why I think...
Isn't that what you meant, Kevin? Explain what you're thinking.
I do agree with everything that Tim said about obviously bringing social care and mental health in, but for as long as I can remember... Labour have obviously thrown accusations at the Tories about looking to privatise and cut everywhere, and obviously it's then gone back the other way at obviously Labour being accused of bringing wasting money and spending middle management, and it's always something that both sides of the coin are always just fighting each other on, where what should really be happening is people who actually know how to run the NHS and how to run these things should actually be in place. They should be given, obviously, whatever money they need and allowed to run it.
OK. And the woman there, yes. You in the second row from the back, yes.
Hello, can I just say I work in the NHS.
You can.
And when I joined, first thing I got told is every time a new political party joins, it will change and it will go round in circles and we'll waste a lot of money. And when the PCTs went down, all their emails addresses just changed and it was the same people. Credible waste of money. And can I just say Jeremy Hunt should resign for his treatment of the previous actors. The smear is appalling. They are hard workers. workers and they do not deserve what the Conservatives have done to them. Shame, he should resign.
All right. Amber Rudd. Jeremy Hunt should go.
Well, naturally, I don't agree with that, and I would really congratulate the combination of Jeremy Hunt and the junior doctors and the BMA in coming to an agreement today. Don't you welcome the fact that the dispute is now, we hope, over, as they've reached an agreement and it's now going to be decided on. So the fact is we made a manifesto commitment to deliver a 7-day NHS, and we've put in place now the arrangements to be able to do that. And an agreement has been reached, and I think it's a great relief.
Why didn't Jeremy make those concessions earlier? Why has he waited so many months to do it?
Independence of the NHS, there is a chief executive. There is a chief executive of the NHS, Simon Stevens, and he was put in place in order to take it out of being a political football, so that he could put together the plan, which he did under the last government, in order to say how much money was needed. He said how much money was needed, and that's why we've put up the extra 10 billion, so it can be done. And can I just say, Yvette, the real differences between a Conservative government and a Labour government is we've got a strong economy that is enabling us to put in that 10 billion. The finances that we inherited from you in 2010 was such a disaster, there would have been no chance to be able to deliver on the strong NHS that we are now able to finance because we've got a stronger economy.
Let's not just talk about the economy. Let's deal with the original question, which was, OK, you obviously need wealth to fund the NHS, whichever party you are, whoever's in power. The question wasn't that. It's why couldn't it be run independently? In other words, you give money to it independently.
Well, that's why we put in place the chief executive.
Well, look, what actually happened, and you were in government, your party did this, the NHS Act 2010. It made the NHS into an independent body, so the idea was the Secretary of State would have nothing to do with it. Jeremy Hunt spends every morning biting his fingernails over the next A&E closure. That's what really happens. He is micromanaging the NHS from his own department, because the act that you and the Tories put into place did not work. What it did was shovel large parts of the NHS into the hands of private companies, many of whom just happen to have directors and owners who are in the Tory party. That is what's happened. That is what's happened.
Well, sorry, which act are you talking about?
I hope the junior doctors throw that deal back in their face. I hope they do.
That's really not very helpful for patients, Paul. What about the patients here?
The patients support the junior doctors.
So
have you met any? Have you met any? Go to Walsall. Go and meet them.
First of all, note that I rebelled on the NHS bill, and secondly...
Congratulations.
Thank you. And secondly, I think the key point in all of this, of the junior doctors debate, it is a reminder that resource is the issue here. And if you constantly keep pushing that ball down the road, it's never going to get solved. So the answer to the question is it does need to be an all-party thing. Because if we're going to take it that step forward, bring in social care, advance mental health, pay for what we need, it is going to cost us more. It will never happen if one party is scoring points off the other. It will only happen if there is a new Beveridge-style consensus.
But how do you achieve that? Yvette Cooper, do you think it's achievable?
Well, I hope so, because it is the thing that people believe in. It's probably the most treasured national institution, with the second one being the BBC, which has also seen quite a lot of attacks recently. I think
Who booed then?
And what were they doing?
Yes. I don't think they were booing the BBC. I think you're all right. I think that Amber didn't answer my question, which is why, in the end, Jeremy Hunt didn't make these concessions months ago. Why has this been dragged out month after month? Why have we had people have appointments cancelled? Why have we had huge threats on hospitals and really undermining the morale of some of the most important assets of the National Health Service, which is the people who work in it? That's what he's put at risk, and that's what we've done wrong.
But would it be possible, just to go back to Kevin's question there, would it be possible to have some kind of institution, we've had this come up on Question Time before, some kind of institution which was agreed between all parties should run the national health? The Chancellor of the Exchequer obviously would give the money or take the money away, but the actual running of it, the detail, would not be in the hands of party politicians, not in the hands of Jeremy Hunt or of a Labour minister.
I think you do want as much decision-making as possible taken by the medical professionals, the experts, the people who are actually should be running the hospitals, running primary care and running care in the community as well. I think the only thing I would caution, though, is if what you simply do is say we're going to, pass all of the responsibility, but it's still going to be the government writing the cheque and not writing a big enough cheque and not actually doing the things that it needs to do, then you've got a problem. And the second thing is, I do still think they should be accountable to local communities. I think we'd be better having more accountability for the National Health Service and social care together in local communities, rather than it be simply something that a health secretary can weigh into whenever he just wants to make a political point and pick a fight.
OK, you, sir. And I'll come to you, Paul.
Yeah, I'm so glad we're having this discussion. I think absolutely right. It should be taken out of the hands of politicians. I'm on the board of one of the NHS trusts locally here. And every 5-6 years, you see this pattern of change when the political cycle changes. And what you actually need is for it to be taken out of the influence of political environments. The one thing that everyone needs to do is to level with the population in terms of what's really going on. There's a humongous demand in the NHS, and it's got nothing to do with immigrants. It's absolutely everything to do with the ageing demographics, the diseases that we're actually being able to cure now, which we couldn't before, and the demands that have been placed, the resources that are available. So you have to level with the population. Do taxes go up? Does the service go down? What is it you actually are promising? Because at the moment, you're trying to make things add up when they won't.
Paul Nuttall.
I think we all realise that we are heading towards us all having to have a debate about the NHS and how it's funded, simply because we have an ageing population, we have a growing population, drugs are becoming more expensive, and it's a debate that we're going to have as grown-ups as we move on into the 21st century.
What's your answer?
Well, my answer is we're going to have to spend a lot more money in the future, and then that will have to go out to a general election, and a political party will have to put that to the electorate to see whether the electorate are willing to plough more money into the NHS.
So taxation is your route. I thought your route was to get people to pay.
Well,
individually.
Well, the UKIP manifesto at last year's general election said that we will plough an extra £3 billion a year into the NHS. But I will say this: the biggest threat, immediate threat to the NHS, comes from the TTIP agreement, the Transatlantic Trade Investment Partnership, which the European Union is negotiating now with the United States. There's an article in it called the Investor-State Dispute Settlement, which will allow American corporations to sue the National Health Service if they do not get what they want. So, for example, at the moment, you've got Philip Morris suing the Australian government because the Australian government have harmed their profits by bringing in plain packaging. That could happen here in the NHS, and the only way we can ensure that we can protect the NHS is by voting to leave on June the 20th.
OK, hold on a second. Let's just clarify this. I thought, Amber Rudd, you clear up on this. This was in the Queen's speech, and I thought there was an amendment to exclude the NHS from this agreement.
That's correct.
So is he just
You
wrong?
must legislate to protect the NHS.
The government already takes the view that...
takes the view, legislate.
The first position is that we take the view that it is excluded, the NHS, from the TTIP. We have a different interpretation to you.
And
since then, you are right, Mr Chairman, we have agreed that the additional legislation will be in place to reassure everybody so that they can be absolutely clear that the NHS will not be included in the TTIP. While I have the floor, may I just say that I think you are absolutely right in your point, that there are expectations that we have to manage of people. We have to decide whether we're going to carry on with what we believe and hope can be a first-class service with additional problems, and if we're going to pay for them. That debate has to take place at some stage. But in terms of the independence of the NHS and who should work that out, part of that has been given to the new chief executive. He puts together the plan, and then it goes to the Chancellor and says, this is what we need to deliver on it. So maybe Paul is right, that system needs beefing up. But the principles of doing exactly that, we have put in place.
I think the point on the...
He is.
He's tried to do that, but the funds he's asked for were actually taken down a little bit.
Indeed, they were. Indeed, that's absolutely correct. But the junior doctors issue, to go back to that point, in any organisation, leadership is so immensely important. And Jeremy Hunt, whether it's right or not, has a leadership position in all this. And how he has managed the junior doctor dispute, well, he's taken a leaf out of how Michael Gove managed teachers. If you've got a group of people who you want to move towards a certain end, the last thing you do is totally demoralise them. And yes, I'm on the side of the junior doctors, but what I'm even more concerned about is all those young people out there, bright young people, who might become medics and doctors in the future, who think, that's not for me now. He has turned off a whole generation of people who might otherwise have gone into our health service.
Right. Football, Mason, very briefly. No, hold on.